Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new week, a new show here on the Routing Loop on Twitch and live on YouTube as well. Super excited about this week's topic, and super excited to be back on Twitch. Actually, I haven't had one of these shows in quite some time, so I miss you all. Great to see you. Great to have these two fine gentlemen here joining me today from the AWS ProServe team. I'll give them the chance to introduce themselves in a second. But yeah, first of all, hi, everyone. Again, I'm Alex. I'm a networking specialist solutions architect with AWS in the AWS Networking Services team. Have been a host here on Twitch for almost 5 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. And yeah, super excited to chat with you all today about a topic that I hope all of you fans of the routing loop are familiar with, which is the fact that I really, really love IPv6, and I think everyone should be doing IPv6. And yeah, that's what we're talking about today. No surprise to anyone, probably. Yes, Ken, absolutely, my favorite topic. There's two topics that I'm really excited about. The first one is IPv6. The second one is VPC Lattice. I think we're going to talk about a bit about both today. So I see Abhishek nodding. So yes, definitely we'll be touching on both today. Super excited to see our long-standing fans here joining us. Thank you, folks, for joining us. If you are new to the show and you have no idea what we're talking about, the Routing Loop is a networking-focused, AWS networking-focused Twitch live stream that happens every Wednesday these days. We used to be on Thursdays, now we're on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I'm not going to try to go through the other time zones, but you folks can do the conversion. I'm probably going to do it wrong. So yeah, good to see you all. Super excited to have you all here. We have a webpage, theroutingloop.net. Jeff, our producer here, hopefully can put it in the chat for all of you folks to have it. If you go to this page, you're going to see previous episodes. You're going to see all our history of all episodes we've had here on the channel. We're talking about all things networking, from VPCs to Cloud WAN to route tables to Lattice to IPv6 to Direct Connect to Interconnect to DNS to like all things, anything that you can think of that falls under the networking and content delivery umbrella on AWS. We're talking about it. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Tech first. And because you've provided us with the great segue into introducing these two fine gentlemen that I have here with me today, Abhishek, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Abhishek Singh. I'm a senior cloud infrastructure architect with AWS Professional Services, primarily focused on financial services customers. I've been with AWS for nearly 4 years now. I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. Big fan of the show, and very excited to be here.
Nice. And let me add to that. Abhishek has the golden jacket. He didn't steal it. It's his. He wanted to show here that he actually has all the expertise he's going to be talking to us about today, especially in helping customers with IPv6 adoption, with their landing zones on AWS. We're going to talk about all of this in just a second, but this is the like the statement, the proof for his statement. So congratulations, Abhishek. Very impressive.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Hi, everyone. Charlie Keegan. I'm a cloud infrastructure architect for AWS ProServe. I've worked with AWS for nearly 6 years now, and I specialize in cloud foundations. So I touch loads of different topics, but then I lean on actually smart people like Abhishek for some of the deeper dive on things.
He's usually not this nice, but okay. I take it.
I think he's very nice to customers. Maybe usually not that nice in your engagements. But jokes aside, which one of you can tell us a bit about what AWS ProServe does? Because I think it's important for everyone who's joining us who maybe doesn't know about AWS ProServe. What you folks help customers with, and why should customers know about you?
Yeah, I can start, and then Charlie, you can obviously add. We at AWS Professional Services, we help customers accelerate their journey on AWS. We do work in the customer environment, so like we are hands-on guys who will start with the prototype, with the design based on requirements, and then take it all the way to production. We have specialists in our org, so like Charlie and me are infrastructure specialists. I mean, Charlie's a everything specialist, but we do have AIML, AIML specialists, DevOps, and data analytics and whatnot. So depending on the type of requirement and that the customer need, we jump in and help out. In terms of a focus standpoint, just because we do get this privilege of working directly with the customer, we are also able to see customer problems, from customers' lens. So a bit of that also involves taking a customer problem and then taking it over to the service team to kind of bridge the gap. Engaging specialist architects like Alex to maybe figure out what the best practices are, and also taking new features or upcoming features from the service teams to the customer to kind of showcase what's coming up ahead.
Got it. That's awesome. So you folks are essentially hands-on the customer side. You get engaged, you deliver things. This is great. It's great also because I don't know how many of you folks following us know, but solutions architects like myself don't actually get access into customer environments. We shouldn't touch anything on the customer environment side. We are trusted advisors, like we can have meetings around what the best practices are and what common architectures are, like how the customer would architect something, but we can't help with the actual hands-on delivery, which I think your role, folks, has that, and
sure.
I think it's really exciting.
There's often a lot of overlap between us and SAs in terms of scope. The difference is obviously as professional services, we can hop between customers probably slightly more easier than solutions architects. But we're often working hand in hand, particularly myself and Abhishek specializing with global financial services. There's dedicated account teams, dedicated solutions architects that have often been there since long before we have. So we're working in tandem with them kind of all the time.
That's really cool. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we know what you folks are doing. For those of you who keep joining us on the chat, we're talking about how AWS ProServe can help customers, yourselves, accelerate your IPv6 adoption journey on AWS. And I want to give a bit of an intro on why we're actually talking about IPv6 at this point. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but on June 6th this year, we've celebrated 14 years since World IPv6 Day first happened in 2012, when there was a big IPv6 adoption day where a bunch of enterprises, large-scale companies participated and enabled IPv6 on their infrastructure. So 14 years. It's been a long time. This year, for the first time on the internet, I think for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not, the internet traffic on IPv6 went over 50%, which is great news. It's really exciting. Also, agent traffic went over 50%. Just recently, I read some announcements on that. So I think even though you folks may not necessarily see the correlation between the two, I think there is. And I think this correlation lays in the fact that there's a lot of new infrastructure being spun up. And with this new infrastructure, the capabilities and benefits that IPv6 provides become more apparent and become needed. And getting out of the limitations that IPv4 brings with just a very limited IP space, and how NAT works in IPv4 are things that the industry overall wants to kind of get out of. So that's the reason why we're talking about IPv6. That's how actually we came up with this idea. But having Abhishek and Charlie here on the show is actually something that was a bit unexpected for me because it didn't start from me. It was an IPv6 conversation that didn't start with Alex going and knocking on doors and being like, hey guys, can you come on the show talking about IPv6? It actually started from you folks. So Charlie or Abhishek, do you folks want to give a bit of insights into how we actually started talking?
Yeah, so myself and Abhishek work with multiple customers, but right now one very large financial services customer who we started when they had nothing in the cloud and they would like more in the cloud. And we've been slowly building out their landing zone. We've been building out their security practices. We've been building out their network. All the normal stuff that you would think, direct connects, managing how you spin up VPCs, IPAM, so you can distribute the IP addresses everywhere. And we didn't think about IPv6 because they don't do that on premise. But we're getting to the kind of scale with them now where we were like, well, if you're hiring AWS professional services to look ahead at your cloud architecture, to think what you're going to need for the next 100, 1,000 workloads that you want to bring to AWS, myself and Abhishek were like, well, we should probably think about this. And what does it look like? And we started naively assuming that the customer we work with would have people who were thinking about it. So we went to all of their networking teams. We went to all of the people that deal with it on-premise. Like, great. Could you guys just summarize your IPv6 strategy? That will help us have one for AWS, and we'll make sure we don't, overlap or do anything, whatever. And they were like, yeah, I'm not that fussed about IPv6. We never will be. So good luck. At which point we thought, yeah, this is an opportunity to raise the bar. We asked everybody that we knew who knew about networking from the specialist SA organizations, if you had to do IPv6 for a large financial service, who would you want to help you? And they said Alex. So we called Alex.
Nice. Super important thing, I think, for me, as I was chatting with you folks, is one, AWS is bringing the thought leadership to customers. We are pushing customers to do the right thing, and IPv6 is the right thing. I think everyone agrees by this time, like it's been 40 plus years since IPv6 has been a protocol, 14 years since World IPv6 Day. So I think there's no doubt around it, even though IPv8 kind of threw a wrench in that and people get excitedly sidetracked on that. We're not going to talk about IPv8 on this show, by the way, or ever, as long as at least I'm on the show. But putting that aside, I think it's really important to see that this thought leadership and pushing customers into the right direction it's not a limited thing in AWS. It does span across solutions architects, professional services, everyone who is working with our customers and working backwards from our customers, but not only working backwards from our customers, but also pushing our customers to do the right things, even when they're not thinking about those things. So that was the first one. The second is, I think from my experience, a lot of my work is actually centered around large financial services customers. They're probably one of the largest category of customers that I work with on their network architectures and networking strategy and on AWS. And now multi-cloud is a thing, so I can actually say multi-cloud too. So having you folks work with other financial services customers and see that there's this push towards creating scalable infrastructure and not propagating this tech debt that we have been used to since forever. And by the tech debt, I mean putting NAT everywhere just because it's easy and we've been doing it for a very long time is actually really exciting. And here's where we landed on, let's get you guys on the show and let's tell everyone first how you folks help AWS customers to begin with, without IPv6 in the mix, because I think that's part number one, which is really, really important. And two, how you're pushing this thought leadership, and not just with this customer that you folks you and I got connected through, but with other customers as well. Some of them who are actually much more advanced on their IPv6 adoption journey, and some of them who are actually not thinking about IPv6 at all. So Abhishek,
Yeah.
do you want to tell us a bit about like what your folks are doing? You mentioned landing zones and you mentioned all of that. I think it would be really exciting for us to know a bit more about what you folks are doing.
So yeah, I mean, I'll talk about a popular engagement that we as infrastructure architects are part of. So this could be for customers that are starting their journey on AWS, but it could be a customer that have kind of a small presence on AWS. So they usually come in with a request where they want an AWS enterprise platform where they can onboard their workloads. And this typically results like we helping them out in setting up a AWS landing zone. Landing zone, as the name says, it's a place where you can land your apps. It's a well-architected multi-account AWS environment. By well-architected, it means it has security baseline, it has centralized logging, it has centralized auditing, it has a network design, which we'll talk about. And then we implement this landing zone using AWS managed service called as Control Tower. So AWS Control Tower is how you orchestrate the creation of AWS accounts, and then you deploy the AWS best practices which are in the landing zone, but also like deploy guardrails. And guardrails are controls, so like they are preventative, they are detective. Preventative controls are something like service control policies. Service control policies are like the maximum permissions that can be allowed in an account. So let's say you have an audit account where your CloudTrail is going in. You wouldn't want an EKS cluster spun up there, or maybe you do. I mean, EKS is going to the moon, so yeah. So I mean, you get the gist. So that's preventative, and then the detective is something around AWS config. So like putting in the best practices, detective rules to kind of maybe check if an S3 bucket is getting created in an account, it should be encrypted. So you bootstrap this multi-account AWS environment. You've got the best practices. You've got the guardrails. Control Tower also offers customization. So like your accounts are created at this point, but you would want to put in some customization. Like you would want an IAM role that needs to be existing in every account, something like that. So I'll talk quickly about there are two types of customizations kind of available in Control Tower. So you have a global customization, which, like I said, it's something that goes in every account. You want there's that one IAM role that you need in every account that gets created, and then you have an account customization bit, which has resources that goes specific to that account, like an S3 bucket or a VPC. Now, these customizations are done through CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure as code. So, the offering does cover CloudFormation as well as Terraform. And then, you can use your code builds and, a code pipeline to actually deploy that stuff in your accounts. So now you have your multi.
Let me ask you one thing, just to make sure that one, I get it, two, everyone on gets it as well. And by the way, before I ask you, actually, everyone who's joined us and is here in the chat, either on Twitch or on YouTube, please let us know your questions in the chat. We are doing this for you folks, so to answer your questions. So if you have questions, please go ahead. I do have a lot, so I'm going to ask them if you folks don't. So take the mic from me. I would highly advise that. So I was saying, Abhishek, just to make sure that that I understand you folks, for the landing zone construct, this essentially gathers all the best practices, all the good stuff that AWS has for customers who are migrating to AWS or who have a small footprint and they're looking at scaling it, following all these best practices around multi-account, multi-VPC, IAM, security, all the good stuff. That's really cool. you have a bunch of customizations that you can do, and you mentioned the ones you can do through Control Tower, like SCPs and all of that. From an infrastructure perspective, is it that you can make part of this landing zone, for example, IPAM, and you can have everything managed, like in terms of IP addresses, your IPv4, your IPv6, your public IP addresses on AWS, and so on?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll come to that in the journey if that's okay. So like
Cool.
that is part of how we land into IPv6. Yeah, so I mean, so at this point, you have your accounts provision, you have your customization. Now let's talk a bit about network design. So we focus primarily on financial services customer, and before you plan on doing anything, the first thing that gets discussed is your inspection, right? When a workload comes into AWS,
of course,
how ingress, egress, east-west inspection, will be handled. And especially when you're building an enterprise platform, the customers do want like a centralized mechanism to do it. So, they love a centralized egress. Some customers love a centralized east-west inspection as well, because they may have application boundaries. Ingress is some love distributed ingress, some love centralized ingress. Like, I mean, that gets covered as
I have very strong opinions about centralizing versus
yeah, I know.
distributing things, so we're not going to go into that right now.
I know. That's why I included distributed ingress. Uh, so yeah, so that also gets. I mean, that's also discussed while we are kind of figuring out your landing zone, parameters. So the inspection bit is covered in your network design, and then like you have an account, you have this customization, you have I think we have dealt with the IAM bit, IAM side of things, but then your workload needs to go somewhere, and that's typically a like a VPC. So inspection is figured out, but then like as the workload is coming into the as the VPC is getting spun up in that account, it will need an IP, right? So that's where a dedicated account where IPAM pools are created, which have contiguous IPs, needs to be set up. So that discussion also happens while we're figuring out what are those landing zone parameters. Now, the IPs could be something, like it could be the IFC 1918 for the non-routable space. It could be the CGNAT for routable. I mean, it's a very, there's only so much we can take. It could also be IPs that are purchased, like that the customer have, and then, they can bring that over to their IPAM pool. Cool. Now, a question, or I can keep going?
Yeah, there's a bunch of questions in the chat, and I hate to interrupt you, but I think they're really good questions. So okay, first and foremost, I don't know if you folks have the answer to this question. If you don't, we can take it offline, and we can have the answer on our next Twitch show. But why is the Control Tower execution role associated with full admin permissions when it doesn't need to have that?
Great question.
That's a really good question.
So I can tell you the answer from a user's perspective, but I will caveat this with I don't work for the Control Tower team, so they may have a different perspective. But as far as I can tell, when you're using a service like AWS Control Tower, you are saying this service is now going to govern my accounts in some way, shape, or form. As a result, it needs the role to exist in each target account that it can assume to perform actions. That is the Control Tower execution role in this case. They give it full permissions because they don't know what you're going to be doing. So they need to know that they have the permissions to be going along with it. If you go to your AWS Control Tower execution role in each account, remove the permissions it has and add different ones, Control Tower will work, but it will not be able to do anything that role doesn't have a permission to do. So it's more to do with you're using the service for what it's for. If you have something, some security concern with that, you should address that yourself in your own engagement. Myself and Abhishek have certainly sat down and done the hard yards with people who don't know AWS or technology, but they are absolutely sure the role should not have this permission or something like that. And you kind of have to walk them through it. And normally we land on, if you don't want it to have this, that means you don't want it to perform these actions. That's fine. But just so you know, that's what you're doing.
As a follow-up to this from Exfanatum, Control Tower then should offer the option to choose your own role during initial rollout. No, I have an actual point to this. Charlie, I'll give it to
Sure.
you afterwards. But from my perspective to what Charlie mentioned, you may not know exactly at the beginning what you need to be doing and the full list of permissions in a granular manner that you need to actually go deploy all the things that you need to deploy. So you can, I think from my perspective, you can always go trim it afterwards to the things that you discover you don't need. But I don't know if you have, just let us know if it's an easy thing to assess at the beginning to say, yeah, I just need these 3 things. And if everything else breaks, I'm fine with that. I don't need anything else.
My advice to the question of Control Tower should offer you the option to choose your own role during initial rollout, I would say no. Like Control Tower service is doing that, building in future capabilities, future releases, everything like that. But that doesn't mean you have to use the Control Tower role to do anything, right? Actually, myself and Abhishek often recommend, like, if you're gonna have something executing deployments in each account, etc., that should be a different role that you create, that you scope the permissions to only exactly what you need and follow least privilege permissions, tighten down the trust policy as much as you can, and release that everywhere and proceed with that. And in this way, basically, the control tower only does what it absolutely has to. You can use things like IAM, Access Analyzer and stuff to check what it's doing if you really want. And that's certainly something we'd recommend for highly regulated industries.
And CloudTrail logs, which are super helpful for you folks to see what is actually happening in monitoring and visibility. So don't forget about that. Deltridge here is saying, seems like IPv6 adoption has been going for 20 plus years. More than that, my friend, more than that. Yes, it is a journey. That's actually one of the reasons why I have a bit of an allergic reaction when I hear about IPv6 migration instead of IPv6 adoption. I think this is a lot about adoption of the technology rather than migrating from IPv4 to IPv6. I think it's much easier to grok and to understand and to reason about when we're talking about IPv6 as a functionality that environments have that you add to environments, right? Rather than having to reason around, oh my God, now I'm going to migrate from A to B. This is like the whole migration story. And Charlie and you and Abhishek probably know the whole emotional involvement that comes up when you say the word migration. So, yeah. The other thing is, and I saw here, another comment that kind of brought sadness and happiness for me at the same time. I don't know how towards which I'm more converging, but Punchar 4161 says, this topic came to me roughly about 8 years back. What's interesting is adoption continues, and my guess will continue for another decade. I totally agree. I think adoption is from my perspective, a journey that every single enterprise on this world, in this world, is going to have to go through sooner rather than later. I think what the industry is going towards right now from an IPv6 adoption standpoint is IPv6 where you can, IPv4 where you must. And I think it's a really nice way to think about things. And we're going to talk, if we have time today, a bit about like how EKS does IPv6. EKS does IPv6 in a really, really nice and smart way where it allows you to use IPv6 for what actually IPv6 makes sense and where it actually helps you scale your workloads, which is for pod IPs. And then it provides you with all the backwards compatibility you need for the existing environment that you have on IPv4. So there's literally very, very few to no excuses these days to start this IPv6 adoption journey, where these tools provide you with the capabilities to have backwards compatibility and to make the most of what IPv6 has to provide you with. So yeah, that was my soapbox. Getting off of my soapbox right now. Luis Lopez here. Good evening, everyone. How's the event going? Very good, very good. We are talking V6, control tower, and everything in the middle. So yeah, Abhishek, you were talking about how you folks are helping customers set these this part of the infrastructure up in their environment. Ken, I have not missed your question. We have it there, and we're going to get to it in a bit. But back to you, Abhishek. Sorry.
Yeah. So now we have a well-architected AWS account strategy. We have a way to orchestrate the AWS accounts automatically. We have our inspection firewalls figured out. How we're going to do that? We have a way to get IPs for a VPC. The next bit is more around what type of workload is coming to AWS. So typically, when the customers are starting their journey on AWS, they kind of start with a single region. But like it is an enterprise platform, so you're talking about hundreds of VPCs. So typically, go with setting up a transit gateway, and then you attach those VPCs to the transit gateway. The routes get propagated, and then the VPCs can talk to the firewall, talk to each other, and whatnot. The financial services customers also do have a presence, on premise. So they would like to connect their on premise, data center with AWS. We have usually seen, they preferring dedicated connections like direct connect, like in a colo, we'll set up a cross connect, and then use like a direct connect gateway to associate with transit gateways, and that way, they are able to get that hybrid connectivity. And similarly, like while we're talking about hybrid connectivity, setting up the resolver endpoints inbound and outbound to have that hybrid DNS set up as well. Now, our platform is maturing. Like we have, this is an enterprise platform, right? We started with a region, we have a workload running there. But then as the platform matures, there are workloads that do need that global presence, or the customer do need to have that presence globally. So they look for strategies on how how are we able to expand the presence globally, and that's where Cloud WAN comes into play. It's a global networking service that uses segments. So we work with the customer to kind of design the segment strategy. We place their lovely firewalls in a network function group, and we use service insertion to kind of place that in the route. I mean, Cloud WAN is great, as a network modernization service, wherein we are going from updating route tables to like defining your intent of the network in a JSON policy. Like this needs to talk to this via this, and then Cloud WAN basically consumes that policy and manages the route tables for you. And it does give that flexibility to the customer, like they can go from one region to like 5 regions, in weeks, and you know that it'll be the same repeatable architecture that exists in each region. So, go ahead. Question?
Yeah, all of this is great. I have one question, and I think this question actually includes what Ken has asked a bit before. Ken is asking about IPv6 for site-to-site VPN and for direct connect connections. Get we will balance over network firewall and egress configuration. I would summarize all of this in one big question, which I know the answer to, but I want everyone to know the answer to. Do any of these services that you folks work with customers as part of their landing zone infrastructure, like VPCs, firewalls, transit gateway, Cloud WAN, direct connect, VPN, inspection, all of this, do all support IPv6?
They do.
Yes.
They do.
Wonderful. Excellent.
We land into when that conversation comes in. Yeah, but yeah, all of the services I spoke about, or we spoke about, does support IPv6.
Cool. Perfect. There are some really good questions that are popping in, so I think we're gonna diverge a bit from the flow of the chat, but I think these are really, really good. First, let's let's just clear this out once more. So professional services has hands-on keyboard support or just guidance? Also not support, by the way.
Both. I mean, we can do anything. The sky's the limit. No. Our teams are available to get hands-on keyboard. We often onboard to the customer. So where we have like large customers, we can come on like a contractor or a vendor or a third party, have access to the internal systems, and build. We can also do a more advisory route. We don't get onboarded. We join calls. We send demos and decks. We do POCs and things like that. So it's whatever the customer wants. Normally, we find it easier to be onboarded because then your Confluence is our Confluence, your Jira board is our Jira board, your AWS account is our AWS account. But it depends on the situation.
Cool. That's awesome. Love it. I would, if I were a customer, I would absolutely use you guys. So that's one. Two, super good question from Luis. How can AWS ProServe assist organizations in developing a strategic roadmap for IPv6 adoption while minimizing operational risk? This is actually a really good question, also from the way it's formulated. So I love that.
I'm pretty much done with my flow, and then when that flow ends, it's pretty much answering the question.
Okay, let's get there. Let's get there.
All right. So we have our accounts, our well-architected accounts. We have a strategy. We have automation that bootstraps that account. We have VPCs with IPs. We have a single region presence. We have a global presence. We have on-premise connectivity, right? So the enterprise platform is maturing. But depending on the workloads that are getting onboarded, some of them will be very, very microservices heavy, right? So like we're talking about thousands of containers, trying to talk to a common set of services. One pattern that we have seen with financial services customers is they typically place a firewall when for different application boundaries. But then a common application boundary could also be a very big app, right? So there may be thousands of containers in that single application. You have common services running as containers, databases, and then hundreds of VPCs trying to access the services. So the customers do look for a recommendation around, hey, why do VPCs are trying to talk to each other, but I'm just trying to access that specific service or that specific database. Why do I have to go through a TGW or a Cloudflare for that? So that's where VPC lattice come into play, wherein we make that common service available in a service network in a lattice, and then your consumer VPCs can have that association, and then they can access that service, but just on that specific port, that specific URI, that specific protocol. So pretty much done with the flow here. So we went from nothing to an enterprise environment, single region, multi-region, application networking. The networking team is good. Life is good. Life is set. Let's go to the beach. But like I said, especially when we work with customers for a long time, we do get to help them in planning for the future, right? And that's where that strategic roadmap does come into play. Now, this could be a strategic initiative, but it could just be Charlie getting up at 3 a.m. and saying, hey, we need to do this forever. So just keep it in terms of a strategic vision, we have a platform, so it is meant for workloads. So that the conversation is, what are the workloads that we're planning, to onboard? We have a platform that is working. Let's move, the stuff that we have on-premise to AWS. And this could be 1,000 Kubernetes clusters running on-premise. Let's kind of move it to, EKS. This could also be everyone's popular topic right now. It's Gen AI, right? So you have these Gen AI services, Gen AI agents need to talk to each other, agents need to talk to the world. How do financial services customers kind of plan for that? And specifically talking from a networking standpoint, it's crucial because usually the networking teams and the applications teams are completely, they sit in a different boundary altogether. The application teams are pretty much focused on, developing the workload, while the networking teams are kind of planning on, how to host them. So the common questions are, how do we make sure the VPC does not run out of IPs? We have an enterprise platform. We will be talking to third-party apps that are on AWS. We'll be talking to, there might be mergers and acquisitions. We have apps that are running on AWS. How do we make sure they're not, overlapping IPs? So these are those strategic conversations where we as ProServe, who have been with the account for a while and kind of seen, what's going on, that's where we bring that IPv6 conversation. Now, I know I pretty much started from scratch and brought it here. It does not happen. It does not happen all the time. It could just be an engagement wherein the customer is mature and they have an EKS, they have a multi-tenant EKS cluster. They have tried private NAT gateway, custom networking, whatnot, and like there is no problem with the cluster, but it's just that they have forecasted the growth and they feel that it'll likely run out of IPs. And
yeah,
we've been talking about this network modernization wherein we have services that are taking care of route tables. We have these cool application networking services. No one really wants to still kind of allot IPs and figure out let's cut a slice. And I know some people still find it fun to do, but when you're looking at growth, right, you really want to focus on the business logic and the application instead of carving out IPs. So this is kind of usually our pitch where we enter. But yeah, I mean.
yeah. And I would add one thing to just specifically Lewis's question around like how can AWS ProServe assist organizations? I think the fact that one, you folks have the knowledge, two, you have the experience, three, you are actually you have the ability to be embedded on the customer side, right? Which is a bit different from how like us traditional solutions architects work. Because I can have a bunch of meetings with the customer, but my role is still let's have an hour conversation or like a 1 day workshop and that's that, right? I'm not tied to that customer, that I'm not embedded in their team, right? But you folks are. So I think these three things are the key to success in this space. Because this how is very dependent on every single customer, like on how customers have their operational flows set, how they like which partners they work with, what is their security stack, and so on. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that you folks have these sort of have the workflow where you start from, and then you're like, okay, let's see what's applicable, what's not applicable, what we need to adapt, and like create the how for a specific customer at a time.
And Luis, I would add one other thing is that professional services are like, we have an ego about some things, but where we don't know, we can call the rest of AWS and be like, hey, I have a customer. This is the situation. This is what I need. This is what they're looking for. And you can get great people like, Alex to come and help us and things like that. So
yeah,
certainly we want to be the go-to people for strategic roadmaps, generally speaking, particularly where we're already with the customer and we understand their operation. But yeah, we're seeing IPv6 come in more for the reasons kind of Abhishek. IP exhaustion is going to be a growing problem as they scale in the cloud.
And this actually comes down to the next question. How important is it for organizations to adopt IPv6, apart from potentially saving the exorbitant NAT gateway costs? I mean, do you need better reasons? No, joking.
To be fair, like, I feel like the cost, at least for mine and Abhishek's customers, just given that we're talking about like the biggest financial institutions in the world, 500, Fortune 500 companies, the cost, it's not that they don't care, they obviously do, but it often isn't the biggest driver. The thing they're petrified of is running out of capacity. That could be compute capacity, IP address space exhaustion. It could be running out of database scalability, whatever that is. And they're also very scared that if they run out of one of those things, it's going to stop adoption, stop technical ability. There's all kinds of audits and regulations they have to come up with. So definitely something where the scalability and the flexibility, at least for our customers, is much more important than necessarily the dollar costs.
Yeah. And I would add one thing here, actually, from like how important it is. Cost is one thing, for sure. Let's not forget about it. But there's actually technical reasons why you should do IPv6. The first one is you keep asking your application teams, if you're on a network side, how big will this application be? And their question is, I have no clue. Like, how big of a cluster you need in EKS? How big this cluster will need to get? So I know how big of an IP space I give you for this VPC. And the reality is that no one has the answer to that question. And the best thing you can do for your organization is to stop asking that question, and to be able to stop asking that question and let application teams scale to its as much as they need based on the business drivers, is for you to do IPv6. That's part number one. Part number two, you could potentially put IPv4 NAT in front of everything, right? Like, just put NAT gateways everywhere. What you will see is that your traffic in your network is going to be NAT gateways to probably load balancers, right? Like, that's your level of visibility on the network side. So it's not enough that networking teams have had historically zero clue about what applications were doing on the network, like what their needs were, what their communication patterns were, and so on. But you're adding another layer that completely abstracts that away, right? And Abhishek mentioned, for example, multi-tenant EKS clusters. Shared VPC is a super common deployment mechanism. If you put an ad gateway in front of a bunch of subnets in a shared VPC that are owned by a bunch of different accounts, which are a bunch of different workloads, you are going to completely abstract what those workloads are doing. So from a security perspective, that is a big challenge. So you have to think about, how are you going to fix that? And I know some of you are going to say, oh, but zero trust, authentication, authorization, and so on. Perfect. If you are doing that 100% in your environment, and you're not relying in any single place just on IP-based rules, you're golden. Put NAT gateways everywhere. I can tell you that, at least from my experience, I have not seen an organization that is at the level of maturity of saying, I have zero trust figured out and it's done, and I have, like, nothing goes on my network that I don't have control over. Everything is authorized, and that's not a problem for me. IP addresses don't matter anymore, right? We want to get to the place where IP addresses don't matter anymore. That's what Lattice helps you with, right? But the reality is that layer 3 connectivity is still a thing, and it will continue to be a thing. And as long as layer 3 connectivity is still a thing, and as long as you're putting things through a firewall that has IP-based rules and, like, filtering, right, you are still reliant on IP addresses. And the moment you're hiding those, right, you've missed that information. So yeah, these are some of the additional reasons why you should be doing IPv6. Not to also say that we're talking about the two areas where you can adopt IPv6, internet facing and in your internal network. Internet facing, the more traffic your public endpoints are going to be getting, and the more ISP networks are going to support IPv6, your clients are going to be IPv6, you are going to miss out on, one, the visibility, the end-to-end visibility between your client and your application, right? Second, you're going to enforce on your clients a poorer experience, because if I'm on an IPv6 device and I need to get to your IPv4 endpoint, I have to go through carrier grade NAT64, which is not great. So yeah, all good reasons across the board for why you should be doing this.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add in terms of, like, our customer conversation. So just because, we get to be in the customer environment, they also really like we also know on what they're looking for. Especially, like, our experience have been from a financial services customer standpoint is, like, the network design needs to be golden first before anything gets implemented. However, since we do have access to our Eisenguards, and we do have these awesome workshops, like there is an IPv6 workshop that kind of talks about ingress, egress, EKS. We do have this opportunity wherein, instead of presenting and talking through concepts and whatnot, we can actually deploy that and show it to them. So, like, this is how a dual stack VPC works. You can just have a dual stack VPC, and still keep having your IPv4 instances. You can have a dual stack load balancer, and it can still route to a a EC2 instance running on IPv4, right? I mean, like we spoke about EKS. Like you can have your worker nodes running on IPv6, but it can still talk to anything that's running on IPv4. Using NAT and other things. So that's, I mean, the workshops, just so everyone knows, it's not just for customers. I mean, we use it too to kind of demonstrate the concept and try out new things. So I would highly recommend the IPv6 workshop. Just remember, the EKS bit can only run in West 2. I ran into that problem. So
there's one question here that I really want to super quickly answer. How can AWS ProServe help organizations ensure business continuity and minimize downtime during a migration from IPv4 to IPv6? There's no migration, there's adoption. And ideally, you wouldn't have downtime because you would just add a capability to existing workloads, or you would add a capability to new environments. And then by adding that capability, your existing stack should not have any issues, should not have any impact. Your IPv6 stack is going to be the new thing that you have to test, and you have to make sure it works, and you have routing in place and DNS in place and all that stuff. But that's for the new stack. For the existing stack, everything that's on IPv4 will continue to work on IPv4 and should not have any issues.
I would also add that there was
Go ahead.
there's some the general thrust of the question is that someone didn't necessarily ask this, for the adoption, not migration, of IPv6. What I think is something that myself and Abhishek have learned with the latest round of customers we've kind of done this with is starting now by making all your VPCs dual stack, using Cloud One and dual stack mode attachments and stuff like that. Means later you don't have to wonder whether turning it on is going to do anything. I mean, we know it's not going to do anything, but you don't create that tech debt. You don't have to figure out, is it enabled yet? Is it not enabled yet? Do I need NAT64? Do I need DNS64? Like all that stuff, you could bake it in now. It'll cost you almost nothing at the scale that kind of myself and Abhishek used to doing with. And when you want to adopt it, it's there for adoption, and you don't have to go back and talk to 1,000 workloads.
Yep. Exactly. There's one more question here that I will super quickly address. What are your positions on IPv6 subnet sizing? /64, leave it default. It's really good. It's standards. EUI 6.4 comes from this and has been essentially the standard since the beginning. Leave it default. Don't try to go crazy with like smaller, bigger. Doesn't make sense. /56 is the default VPC size. Leave it default. /48 per region for GUI IP space. Go for /48 or larger if you have more VPCs that you want to address. With IPv6, in terms of the addressing plan, there's a bunch of examples that we have online around understanding the types of IPv6 addresses that are supported on AWS and the best practices around them. I'll find the blog in a second once I finish talking here and post it in the chat. But my personal guidance to everyone who's watching us is keep it simple. That's the best thing you can do. IPv6 addressing plans should not be rooted in the same sort of limitations that IPv4 has, whereas you always have to think about how many workloads should a network have, right? Or how many IP addresses should this network have, and start working backwards from that. No, just erase that from your head. Everything, every end network, every subnet should be just /64 where you have workloads. And the addressing plan, the core feature of a well-architected addressing plan is its scalability in IPv6. It's not I have 10 workloads in the subnet, I'll just do a /127 or I don't know, 126 or something like that, right? Don't think of it like that. I know that there's like this fear mongering, way of thinking, fearful way of thinking about IPv6 addresses, where people are saying, we ran out of IPv4 addresses and people never thought we were going to run out of IPv4. What stops us from running out of IPv6 addresses? Please go read some books that have been written by some people that are way smarter than any of the three of us here. I can recommend some titles and reason a bit about how large the IPv6 space is and understand scientifically what it would mean to run out of IPv6 addresses. And this fear will subside. Like, I guarantee. There's no fear around running out of IPv6 addresses. It's more important right now for addressing plans to be scalable, for enterprises to use v6 addresses in the way these v6 addresses were intended to be used, to create connectivity that's scalable, right? To create firewall rules, filtering mechanisms that are scalable, to create summarizable addressing blocks. That's much more important. It's not like let's squeeze into a /80 because we have billion of IP addresses in just a /64. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I'm hoping I'm not missing too many questions. We have like 4 minutes and we still have a lot of questions. So I'm really excited that you folks are sharing these. We're scaling containerized workloads across multiple AWS accounts. What IPv6 design decisions have you seen create the biggest operational security challenges later in the adoption journey? Oh, very, very good question. I have a couple. First, not a well thought addressing plan. That's why I said, don't try, like I've seen customers go with addressing plans where they're squeezing VPCs into /60, because we do support that today. And then saying, oh, I need to attach another CIDR, another prefix to the VPC because I need to create some other set of subnets. Don't go that way. Just like leave it by default. That's really important. Second, say I can't bring a /48 per region because I don't have enough IP space from my internet registry. Hence, I'm going to bring a smaller IP block, and I'm not going to be advertising it on the internet. That's a one-way door decision. If you bring a GUA IP space in AWS in a region that is smaller than /48, is exactly the same thing as you would be bringing an IPv4 IP space into AWS, a public v4 space, that is smaller than /24. You will not be able to advertise that on the internet. Hence, you will be stuck into either advertising an aggregate from your on-premises, which means your internet connectivity on IPv6 will always have to go through on-prem to get to AWS, or you will be coming to ask about NAT66. So you're back into the game of putting NAT. So not great. And I have one more. Inspection with IPv6 works great for distributed environments. For centralized environments, you need NAT66. There's no way around it. And AWS doesn't currently support NAT66. We can talk roadmap, but just from my currently statement, you can think of what's coming. Even if at some point we will support IPv6, I would NAT66. Sorry, I would not recommend you do it. the whole idea of IPv6 is to not do NAT. So think of IPv6 as not to map your existing architecture in v4 and to just do the simple one-to-one mapping in IPv6. Think about your architecture in IPv6 based on the principles that IPv6 is promoting, which are you're going to have connectivity, you're not going to have to abstract IP addresses, you're not going to have to hide IP addresses behind that. So what would that architecture look like? I think that those are my 3 things. Abhishek, Charlie, anything that I missed?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, I know we just have 1 minute. The only thing I would say as a closing thought is you don't have to be a Netflix to do IPv6.
Cool. Yes, absolutely. You don't have to be Netflix. Netflix is doing a great job. So I want to thank the folks on the Netflix side for all the support that they've shown throughout the years. We've hosted World IPv6 Day with them a couple of years ago. So for all those of you interested in how they're doing IPv6, they have a bunch of blog posts. Really exciting stuff. I'm really happy that you folks are interested in this conversation, and yes, we can absolutely have more conversations about this and go deeper into designing IPv6 and how things would be implemented. So I would love to have these fine gentlemen join me on the show more, and we're on time. So thank you so much, folks. Have a good one.
This was great. Have a good one. Thank you.
Bye, guys.